Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last IRMS Public Sector event of 2022. I mean 2021. I'm getting very confused now. In a moment, I'm going to hand over to our speaker, Alison North, but just a couple of housekeeping issues. If you would like to ask a question and you can see the questions tab, could you please put your question in the questions tab and we will deal with all the questions at the end. And if you would like to use the chat function, please feel free, but please make sure that obviously that the chat is constructive and positive if you possibly can. So, without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Alison North, who is our speaker for this afternoon. So over to you, Alison.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. It's Christmas, somebody told me the other day, although apart from the Christmas tree that we've got in the house, I haven't really seen too many Christmas decorations around. Not being able to get out, of course. Well, I can get out, but you know what it's like at the moment. You're best to stay in, I think. Today, I'm going to chat to you a little bit about our ghosts from the past, from the present, and also from the future. It's not an academic paper. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek, and I'm aligning myself with Charles Dickens. So forgive me for that. So the Ghosts of Records Management, other names are possible. Records Management is just our original name. Past, present and future yet to come. So a bit of social and historical context with the liberties I'm going to take with the Christmas Carol. Charles Dickens wrote this story in 1843. And at that time, there was a tradition for reading ghost stories at Christmas, hence the numerous spirits that Scrooge encounters. The themes of wealth and injustice are really clear comments on the inequalities of the wealth distribution in Victorian England at that time. I'm not going to comment on that in terms of today in the UK, but there are slight parallels, I think. However, I've taken this liberty of using some of his words in Christmas Carol and altered them very slightly to describe us in our profession. And I hope you'll forgive me and be assured that the original intent of the book is not in question. I'm sure you all know, because it's a really well-known story, but on Christmas Eve, Scrooge is visited by a series of ghosts, starting with his old partner, Jacob Marley, and then three spirits which follow: the ghost of Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas yet to come. And they show Scrooge how his mean behaviour has affected those around him. At the end of the story, a happy ending, he's relieved to discover that there's still time for him to change. And we see him transformed into a generous and kind-hearted human being. In much the same way, my comments today focus on how our behaviour as records managers, and as I say, other information job titles are acceptable, has affected the management of information over the past, in the present, and discusses what has yet to come. And some of you who know me will know that I am very focused on future thinking and looking at where we're going with management of information. So here we go. And here's my first alteration of the words. I've changed Dickens' words in his preface of the book, and with apologies to him, changing those couple of words to explain that I've endeavoured in this little ghostly little paper to raise the ghost of an idea which shall not put my audience out of humour with themselves, with each other, with the season, or with me, and may it haunt you in your houses pleasantly, and no one wish to lay it. I do love his Old English. It kind of, I don't know, it just makes me warm inside for some reason. I just love reading that. Anyway, here we go. So to begin with, records management was dead. To begin with, there can be no doubting that. It had been around for 70 years or so, but now it was dead and buried, along with the people who stayed within its realm until long past its usefulness. We all knew that, those of us who at one time toiled long and hard to keep the profession afloat, gradually drifting away into other realms, and just before the end came. We kept the memories, the pins, the sustainable coffee cups, the bags, but even those items were disappearing as fast as you could say, "I, robot." But the profession, it was gone. No more to uphold integrity, no more to provide trust, to encourage responsibility, to deliver the truth, no more to support the business. But there is hope. It is required that the spirit within should walk abroad, travel far and wide, perhaps become integrated with another, reborn. In this paper today, you'll be haunted by three spirits, but unlike Scrooge, you will take them all at once and have it over. So first, let's look at the past, your past. So I'm going to go through a few things that I've come across in the past, and I'm not going to go back the full 70 years. I'm not going to dwell on the past because it's vast and covers many decades. And as you know, it was only in 1983 in the UK that we came together as a society, and I'll touch on that. But in the past, we've been quite fragmented, and I have to say, possibly we still are. We came together, as I say, in 1983, and we were originally brought together by a commercial enterprise, a storage company, who raised the idea of bringing us into a society of like-minded people who were managing information within commercial enterprises mostly, because that's who they were serving. They weren't really serving any public sector people. And obviously it was initially a way for these commercial enterprises, so they thought, to build their business. But actually it didn't work out like that, because the people who came were the people who were the workers, people like me, people like John Wilson. We went to the meeting and we discussed the whole idea of file management as it was back in the day. Yes, some of it wasn't really called records management widely. Some people had started using that terminology. Most of us were fairly highly skilled and experienced in different aspects of it. So we were from disparate backgrounds. Some of us had degrees in things like history, or some of us librarians, some of us were archivists, and some of them were like me, totally unqualified, who just had experience. And so we brought a wealth of different ideas into this melting pot, as it was at the beginning. We discussed how, as time moved on, we discussed how frequently we were shut in the basement. We were incredibly helpful people, but we were also incredibly helpless, because being shut in the basement along with the archive boxes, we were seen as people who dealt with box storage. We weren't really seen as people who dealt with the content of the boxes and what was actually on the page. And most file clerks in that era would state, well, I don't actually read what's there. I mean, I'm very confidential. I don't actually know what's in there. So we weren't seen as people who had an understanding of the content of the records. We were hugely underrepresented across many areas, even the professional areas. So even though some of us might have come initially from the librarian background, the actual Society of the Chartered Institute, what was it called? CILIP, the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals, they didn't really see us necessarily as part of their profession. So definitely fragmented and definitely underrepresented. And much like the Ghost of Records Management, or the Ghost of Christmas Past in the Christmas Carol, that we were indistinct. We fluctuated from being known about to not being known about. And we didn't really do very much about that. We just stuck our heads down. So our action at that time was almost to bury our heads in the sand. Yes, we had a society, but we kept very much to ourselves, and we didn't collaborate very much. So I think the lack of collaboration was a challenge for us. Moving on a little bit to the present. And the present covers, for me, quite a long time. I mean, I know the present is today, but for me, it's also possibly a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and also thinking forward. So this section here really talks about things like our unshifting commitment to doing this work. We've really, one of the main actions, I feel, one of the main things that we are, is we're totally committed to managing information with a passion. And we can become incredibly detailed about that. And that could be a bit of our downfall too, is because we become a little bit too intense on some of the things we do, too fixed in some of our ways. So a little bit old-fashioned sometimes we're seen as, not I'm saying we necessarily are, but we do rely a lot on things like standards and regulations, and we quote these and we work with these, and then we talk about retention, and that doesn't come across particularly well with laymen beyond our sphere. We know this. What's interesting for me is that whereas our detail was tripping us up in the recent present, it's actually now something which other people are looking for. So our skills now are being sought by other professions, and they're being discovered by other professions and retitled in different ways. So our, if you like, our file planning is still something that is needed, but it's IT that's taken to that. They are looking at different ways of planning the hierarchy of the information within their systems, but they're not really talking to us in many circumstances. So we've got these skills, but we're not actually displaying them in the right environments. We're keeping them to ourselves. We are responsive, but we're responsive in a way that actually keeps us in the past in some ways. So yes, somebody says, okay, we need, and I'll go back to retention again, we need a retention policy. We don't think necessarily, should that retention policy be done in a different way? Should we disrupt the retention policy? We kind of say, oh yes, okay, and we set to and make the policy the way we've always made it. And I think sometimes that action of not disrupting how we've done it in the past, and even today how we do it, is probably one of the problems that we've got. It was interesting to me, I follow a LinkedIn influencer called Bernard Marr, who deals a lot with technology and new technology, and I had to smile, because for the first time he wrote about something he discovered. It was like, this is new, and it was an untapped source of information, and you know, it was something that we were going to have to really consider in the future. Guess what he was talking about? Unstructured information, something we've been speaking about for a long time, but our voice was never heard. But we need to look at the positives around this. In a sense, this is a good time for us. There are so many things that we can be doing. We have already proven ourselves in areas like data protection, and I think we can prove ourselves in other areas. We just have to look for those opportunities and move ourselves forward. And it's interesting that, again, going back to A Christmas Carol, that there's a bit in it, it's not quite as he says it, but there's a bit in Christmas Carol that says, there are some upon this earth of yours who claim to nurse. Remember that and charge their doings on themselves, not us. And really, to me, that smacked of the accountability. There are many, many people who know now what we do, but they still think that we're accountable for doing the work, not providing the how to do the work, or the idea behind the work, the reason behind the work, and the tools. So we still have to get across that message that, yes, we do know how to do this, but you're supposed to do it. And I think that's one of the things that, one of the actions that we haven't really got to grips with. So we're constantly, I think, also being reinvented. So let's just talk a little bit about being reinvented. So we've risen, haven't we, like a phoenix from the paper ashes into the digital age. And one of the challenges that we have in this indistinctiveness, if you like, of ourselves, is that because we've morphed into different areas and different types of people, we're not consistent enough with what our profession does. It's very difficult to explain in one word, or one or two words, I should say, what our profession does. But we've got some really good advantages here. We've got things like regulations. Regulations are good for us because we can show how managing the information reduces the risk around complying with regulations, and that's really good. So we reinvented ourselves into the data protection arena as an example, and we're also beginning to reinvent ourselves into the cyber area. So cyber security into security, we're beginning to look at that, and we're beginning to understand more about the risk of the information not being the right information. So we're also looking at integrity and other risks which will hinder a business moving forward. And then, as I said before, we've got this ever faithful retention schedule, which I think is due for a huge disruption. And I think we will stop doing it the way we do it, and it will become part of a much more automated, it's already starting, in fact, an automated system. And we won't really be that heavily involved in it. I have to say, normally by this time when I'm talking to you guys at Christmas, I'm jumping up and down across the room and looking at Elizabeth and saying, have I got enough time? Because we're always on such a time schedule. Here, I've only been speaking for 16 minutes. Goodness me. I will not be speaking for an hour. But it's quite interesting that when you're online like this, you've absolutely no feedback. You could all be asleep, you could all be leaving, I could be talking to empty airspace. It's quite a surreal experience. And I think that one of the things I've learned, and I have reinvented myself online, is actually quite hard work to do, not getting audience feedback. So I'm hoping that Elizabeth is putting through, you're getting some questions through, so that I can chat with you at the end. But moving on beyond the reinvention, so this in the present day reinvention, and looking at things which, again, I'm moving myself out of our arena and saying, is it time for a reset? Is it really time for a reset with the information management world? I believe it is. And what I tend to do looking into the future is I tend to look at the big picture things. I look at the macro trends, the social trends, how behavior is changing. And there are social, cultural, political, and environmental factors that are shifting people's thoughts and behaviors. So in terms of social, so digitized relationships with government and businesses, that's going to bring a huge change. And that's going to be a big bit for us, because all the information and data that they're going to collect and use on government as a service, for instance, or local government as a service, and the possible new areas that the current government is trying to introduce in terms of having governors and mayors and all those sorts of things in bigger regions, that'll impact on us, because they're going to be bringing information together from lots of different areas. So in the public sector, I see a huge amount of work to be done on gathering data across areas to bring it together, to analyze it, to make it valuable for the area that we're in. So huge opportunity there. And I think in the political arena, we've also got the rise of nationalism and global disconnect separating us into multipolar worlds. So up until this point, globalization's been the thing. Corporates have gone and they've brought together all their services and products, and they live in a global world. Now they're talking about multipolar. So just these areas, maybe Asia with China, America on its own, India, accelerated by the pandemic, but they've been working on distinct economics, different with their culture, similar cultures with other areas, and their laws, which will take us apart as a world, but bring them closer together. And these poles would be able to develop their own security networks, data privacy standards, and more. Is this good for our profession? Can you see anything of a benefit in there? I'm struggling with that at the moment. I'm trying to work on that and saying, how would that affect us if that were to happen? How would it affect what we do going forward? If you're working for a large organization across the world and suddenly the organization has to be in these smaller areas, working much more within the culture of that area than it did before, and dealing with the laws, etc. It might be easier in some ways for the organization, but would you get that pollination of ideas and thoughts across businesses? And how would the information work? And how do large corporates undo these knots that we've got? And then they've got their staff, you know, which feel threatened by automation and undervalued by employers, people floundering with different ways of maintaining contact with things, and so feeling a little unprotected by governments. Some of our largest industries, such as food, healthcare, they're in the middle of massive changes, partly due to things like environmental issues and accelerated digitization. And they've been forced to invent themselves to cope with demands being made by this disruption. All use huge amounts of data to inform them to help them move forward. And I think that's going to happen in our regions, in our public sector, local and national government. We're struggling with this at the moment, so I think that that's a big time to move forward. I'll come to the digital one in a second, but I think it's a time for a reset, and just maybe over to me just very briefly. In 2015, I predicted that our profession would be automated within less than 10 years. I talked about the invisible, well, I called it the invisible man, brackets woman, from H.G. Wells, of course, another favourite author of mine. So an invisible information specialist, someone who managed everything but who's never seen, and I'm just reading here from the things I said, all you feel is a slight breeze as I speed past. And then there would be various people working with me, archive people, I call them archangels, to help watch over the retention of the documents, and data darlings who fix those random ones and noughts that the document devils spin out every so often, and so on and so forth. But basically what I was trying to say would be an unseen army of electronic helpers that's been trained by us. And that's the key thing. These electronic helpers, they can't help if we haven't trained them. So we need to get in the piece of doing this and not leaving it up to the IT people. And you've heard me bleat on about this before. I say I started in 2015. But my vision is that there would be very little need for separate things like e-discovery processes, because any lawyer would be able to sit down in front of any machine and find what they were looking for, because it would all be there and it would all be sorted out and it would be nice and easy. Maybe I'm wishful thinking, because there's a huge piece in there for us to help with this. But I don't think it's that unlikely, and we're getting closer, as I say, with the new types of automation that's coming down, the robots. And I watched a video, and I just briefly watched this video, and this goes into the digital area, where the robots themselves weren't programmed, and I call them robots because it looked a bit like a robot. They weren't programmed, but this machine learned after about 1,000 attempts how to pick things up and put them in different boxes. And then when it came across a shape that it had never come across before, it had to pick it up. It took 1 or 2 attempts, well, actually probably nearer, well, into the hundreds of attempts probably by the time it got it. But the point being, it was self-learning. It wasn't programmed to do it. And I think that's quite an interesting move forward. So because we've got those sorts of machines happening and coming into our domain, how do we deal with the data in that? So we've got to, again, going back to our profession, what's our reaction to all of this? How do we have a reaction? And I heard a lot of good stuff at the RMS conference recently, but it's still not far enough forward. So what are we doing? The main purpose of studying the future for me is to look at what may happen if present trends continue, to decide if this is desirable, and if not, work to change it. Something's definitely changed, and the old way must be brought into sync with the new variables. But where do we reset from? And if I was going to look at the future, where would I start? So I think that going in that sense, it's back to the AI, isn't it? And it's back to the digital. It's where my heart lies. I can't do everything, so the digital area is good. And as I said, you know, the AI reset, the fact that we're now having these intelligent robots, and they'll only get more intelligent, that worries me a little bit. And we've actually seen that coming through. Journalists are now beginning to start talk about information, these automated weapons, so intelligent weapons, which, you know, is very scary. So where can we be in that piece? Where can we start as a society, even not just as individuals, but as the IRMS? Shouldn't we be making a statement about this? Shouldn't we be talking about how we can make that information trustworthy and have integrity, and we can guarantee it's fine, so that people can't actually fiddle with these systems and feed incorrect information into them? And that's down to us fighting the criminals again, isn't it? And so we've got that, and then we've got the identity. So our identity is who are we? And it's, the answer to that can be very varied and complex, and we're eroding the individual in a way as we go on, not just with all the non-digital things that are happening in terms of identity, but the digital things. So I wear a lot of items, watches and other things which dictate how my heart rate is, how my running went, how, you know, whether or not I've recovered sufficiently enough, whether I've been strained all day, whether this presentation is stressing me out. All of that is information gathered, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, as you know. And again, we've been talking about that. So this the identity stack, if you like, and how we make that honest as well. So the are we going to have regulatory obstacles come along? How are we going to get involved in that? There is so much to really look forward to and to enjoy, because we are information people. And so I think the future is really quite exciting. I mean, it always has been to me, but I think it's even more exciting now. And then we've got the blend, this deep hybridity, as they call it, a blend of physical, biological, and digital. So it'll be, and the new world will be where everything mixes and mingles in our daily experience. And so we all need to consider how our jobs and our business is running in terms of physical and digital experiences, not just in the digital experience. And then, as I say, we're bringing in the biological side as well. Some years ago, this book spoke about the fourth industrial revolution. It was all about cyber physical systems and using technology to dramatically change our world. We've moved on a bit for that. In fact, the Japanese, I think it is, are talking about the Fifth Society. So you get a chance to Google the Fifth Society. That's quite interesting, because they're writing a lot about this kind of thing at the moment. And I'm not an expert. I'm just beginning to study this because I find it absolutely fascinating and place us in it. So what is your action? So again, going back to the Scrooge story, how is your behavior going to impact on where we go as a professional based on what's happening? And I think that's really, really, really important to discuss. So what are we? Well, we're really resilient people, because we're still here 70 odd years later. We anticipate, we prepare for, and we adapt to change and disruption. We may not think we do, but I believe we do. I think we're really quite good at this. I think that it's a real positive. Now, it may seem that we're still a bit fragmented, and I think that's one of the challenges. I really believe we need to come together as a bigger group to discuss all of this and again get that cross-fertilization of ideas across the different groups, and that way our specialty will be more easily recognizable in amongst all the others. So I think we should do that. But we are good at this, and we've always been able to adapt to change and disruption, because that's what we've happened from the paper through to the digital age. We're now going into the next stage. So I think bear that in mind. Continue to be resilient, continue to do those three things: anticipate, prepare, adapt, and change. And please disrupt, even in a small way. I really need to fire you up to disrupt. We need to get out there and get going. And even if I'm I can shout very loud. If you want me to shout, then tell me what you want me to shout, because I cross a number of different sectors, and I'm not the brightest brain in this group. There are far brighter ones than mine. I just want to get us moving forward. So please, please shout. Anyway, enough of the sort of call to arms. The last thing I really wanted to talk about was in Marley's ghost is at the very beginning of the book, as I'm sure you'll know. But it's interesting that Marley's ghost cries business, wringing his hands. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. And that's where business is going today. That is absolutely where business is going today. We are more concerned at the people who work with us. We are more concerned about helping people, and we are building all our systems around these things now. And I think that's quite an apt quote for today and going forward. Maybe not exactly like that, but the actual idea behind it. So I am going to leave you with one thought, returning to my dear friend Dickens. And as he said, let me dig you all in the ribs, I can't even say it, and end by saying, with apologies to the erstwhile author, let us have no further conversations with ghosts. Let us keep records management well. If anyone possesses the knowledge, it is within us. To be continued. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Alison. That's certainly given us a lot to start thinking about. We do have one question so far, and I've got a couple of others. But Colin has asked, how safe is it to rely on algorithms, given that history took so long to expose the Post Office Horizon failings and machine learning without human oversight? And where do you think the IRMS role is in leading information ethics?
No, right. That's the. I'm struggling to get. I'm trying to get out of this. Can you give me a second to see if I can get out of my my fingerprints and I come back? Oh, have I managed to? Have I stopped sharing? Because we had a bit of trouble at the beginning. Okay, I absolutely, totally think right now algorithms are not that safe. Okay, so again, this is coming from I'm not an expert. And I take your point about the post office. That was dreadful. It was a few years ago, but it was dreadful. And that really goes to my comments about how we get into the arena of machine learning. So we are very good at understanding the integrity of the information. So we know its source, we know where it's come from, we know it's truthful, because that's the way we roll. You know, we set up systems to be able to do that, and we really need to get in and talk to these people. Now, that isn't the easiest thing in the world, but right now, yes, the algorithms, some of them are a bit dodgy, and a lot of it, as we know, is based on dodgy information underneath. So it's really difficult, and we need human. I am not dissing human oversight. I'm saying we're in the piece. If you remember in 2015, I said that we trained all of this, that we were the ones who were there explaining what had to be done, and that we would be still there making sure it worked. So the human is still in the piece, because the human is definitely the one that has the ability to do it. After all, the robot, the machine that's learning, at the moment anyway, the robot picking up the blocks and putting them in, or even playing chess, they can't actually get up off the seat, walk to the shelf, pick up the chess box and bring it to the table and lay it out. He doesn't do that. So we still have a big role. And I can't answer at the moment where IRMS role is leading in information ethics. I'm not close to the center, but I think that in terms of at the moment, what I would be suggesting we should be looking at that. We should be as a group, there should be some people set up as a group to look at the ethics and how the IRMS can help bring that forward. There are a number of other groups working in ethics, and I think we should have representatives in these. So obviously, because I'm not close to the centre anymore in terms of the IRMS, I can't answer if anything is being done. I can't believe it isn't being mentioned, but I think we need to start getting ourselves into these groups that are already doing it. Does that help, Colin?
So I've just just said to I know Jana was on the call, so our vice chair, and she may have something she would wish to add about what the IRMS is actually doing at the moment, because I know there is quite a lot going on. But while I'm waiting for her to respond, can I just ask, do you think that the title records manager is now limiting us both in our own views and in the views of the people we're working with? Do we need to start thinking about finally retiring that title and looking at different kinds of ways of describing how our professional lives work?
Well, not wishing to upset anybody, the term records manager has always been a little difficult to explain away anyway, and personally I've never really liked it, so I never was called a records manager. When I was employed, I was always an information something or other, and I insisted on that because I just didn't like the term records manager because it didn't really say what it did on the tin. And it is a very American, it was originally brought over from the US, where they are still records keepers, and they have a, you know, the various societies and groups that are called that as well. So yes, I think we should move on from records management. I don't think we should forget it's where we came from. So I think that there's nothing wrong with us mentioning in, you know, in our past that we were records managers, but I don't think people understand that. The challenge is that the English language has so many meanings for the word information, that if we call or information management, that if we say information management, it's always had this challenge that that's IT. Well, I think we need to get over worrying about that as well at the moment, because I think I explain that and say, yeah, no, it's not IT. I'm all about the information. I'm all about the content. It is T because we are working in technology. So yes, some of us still have paper to deal with, but in the main, everybody is working in technology. So I think, yes, we do need to push away from records management as a title and start focusing on how we can show more clearly a much snappier name, if you like, in terms of what we're doing. But I haven't, you know, open to ideas, always open to ideas.
Thank you. I thought that was what you would say, but I think it's just interesting for us to start looking at how we're evolving as a profession away from, as you said, where we started. And that kind of segues into my next question about where you think the best place in the organisation that this particular role, the roles that we fulfil, would sit. Because obviously, like most people, I started off in the archives and then moved across the organisation, and I'm now part of the legal part of the organisation, and I guess other people are in the same position. And I just wondered if you thought there was a real sweet spot where we should all aim to be in the organisation, where we might get the most influence.
So that's an interesting question too, actually, because not talking about levels, I'm not talking about hierarchy. So how high up you are in the company or the organization. The challenge that we've got is that a good challenge, because we run across the whole business, we don't naturally fit anywhere. So there's very, very rarely does a job actually encompass across every single group. So it's actually quite difficult to place you in a specific area. And if you do get placed in an area, then you are seen as, if you're in legal, you're seen as a legal person without a qualification. So you're not a lawyer, so what are you? If you're in finance, you're not an accountant, so what are you? And as you go back to the basement, again, with the metaphorical basement in your case. Oh no, actually you were downstairs for a while, weren't you? Metaphorical basement. You know, those basements, when we were all in the facilities management team, as was, that was wrong as well, because we weren't facilities management. So it's a very difficult position to place us in. I actually, right now, and this could change, my favorite place is actually in IT. And the reason, and again, the reason behind that is because they don't know very much about, the greatest respect, some of them do, but not all of them know very much about content, and not in the way we do. And we are customer facing and they are internal facing. So they're looking at, to be customer facing, if you like, doesn't put us with the ServiceNow people. It doesn't put us with those guys who are and girls who are doing the fixing the problems when your teams goes down. But we are in the customer space because we're the ones who go out into the business, and that would be hugely useful for technology, because technology doesn't understand the business and we do. So you bring your skills, your information skills, your business skills, your understanding of the business and your understanding of their different language into technology. You enhance the technology people, you enhance the IT people, and I'll show you what I mean. I've been working with pharmaceuticals a lot over the pandemic and just prior to the pandemic. I had to translate between the manufacturing plant and the IT people around a simple word: backup. Backup to IT was one thing, one off, one on, one on the wash. Backup to the manufacturing plant was a 15-day cycle that they had to do with what they were doing, and it was regulated. So when they talked together about backups, because IT was trying to introduce a new backup system and everybody had to use it, technology couldn't explain that to the business. I had to explain it in the middle as a translator. And that's why I think in technology right now, it would be a really good place to sit. Maybe not forever, but certainly right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because those are the kind of conclusions I've been coming to, but I'm sure that you remember, as I do, sort of 6 or 7 years ago, we had colleagues who were in IT departments who were fighting their hardest to get out of the IT department into somewhere they considered to be more standard. And I think that it really, the whole AI and the electronic environment has turned all of that on its head. And certainly I work very closely with our IT colleagues, as much to explain to them about how compliance and information governance and all those kind of things work, so that they can embed them in the system. So I think it's definitely worth us thinking about where we are in any particular organisation. Anne has just come up with them. She's always liked information governance as a title. I must admit, I have mixed feelings about that, because I'm in an information governance team, and my information governance colleagues who've got information governance in their title deal with all the access to information. So I guess it kind of depends on how you define information governance. So I don't know how you feel about that in that sense.
Do you know, governance is a big word, and I don't talk about information governance. So when I speak to certain clients, I say I'm in governance, because putting the tag information in front sometimes misleads them, because then they think you're IT again. So they confuse data governance and information governance. And I know that's a thin line, and I'm skating on thin ice there. I won't go into that because there's lots of different definitions of those two, which is one of the other reasons to be in IT at the moment, is to get that straight and know what people do. But in terms of that, I'm just an information professional. So in terms of titles, it doesn't really matter. You can call yourself whatever you like within the group. What is your purpose is more important. So why are you there, and what are you hoping to achieve? And unless you can define your purpose in a few words to the management, then you're not going to achieve anything. So no matter where you are, it's all about not your job title, it's all about what your purpose is. And the clarity around how that purpose delivers what the business is about, or the organization is about.
So we've got a few things that are sort of popping up in the chat now. Jana said at every reorganisation they've been relabeled to something new without it having a massive impact on their function. So they've been information management, records management, informatics, information governance, with links to many other business areas, data management, information security, contracts, etc., who also get new labels. And it makes it very hard for any new staff to understand what is going on and who is doing it. And now the concepts are knowledge and information management and IG working collaboratively.
I do understand that. I do. I mean, it's just like a name. It's just, changing names constantly does confuse, and it doesn't really help. As I say, I just go back to saying it really don't talk about it. Okay, so you're on an organization chart, which I don't like those either, by the way, but you're on an organization chart and that's what you're called and that's what you're graded as, because that's HR, and it all connects up into the whole big organization, and they change and they reorganize every so often and everyone gets changed again. But it really and truly is about what you do. It's about clarity over what your role is and your purpose and the understanding. So, you can say you do something and people totally misunderstand you. They need to understand what you're saying. And sometimes I think, so that's one of the behaviors I think we can get wrong, because that's the detail. So that's sometimes we get into the detail too much. It needs to be high level for everybody. And that's not always easy to do. I appreciate that, but that's something we have to work on.
We've got a quote here from Carol, who says she likes this quote: "Records manager only because full-time multitasking ninja is not an actual job title."
Do you know what, Carol? That's absolutely how I feel. I mean, but I love that. I'd love to be a ninja. I think that's just a great title. Ha ha! No, yeah, definitely multitasking ninja. That's the story of my life.
So we've sort of got about 10 minutes or so, but my other question was going to be, because I know that you've reinvented yourself over so many years, and you've now finally admitted you are actually not going to retire. We're going to have Alison until you're until you get called on to greater things. So what would you say perhaps are the 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you could give to people who are working in the sector today to keep themselves relevant as the future moves?
Okay, the most important thing that I did was I got out of the fish pond. I removed myself from only being part of this community, and I landed myself in some very uncomfortable other communities that I didn't understand, but I learned so much. So it's that ever learning curve. You keep on learning and just going to different arenas to try and learn more, because what you do affects absolutely everything, and it always has done. So it's not just the digital era. Managing information is something that people don't really know how to do. We need to teach our children from the outset. Certainly now we need to teach them about the integrity side of things. It's something I'm passionate about getting into schools to talk about in a simplistic way. Any good about writing children's stories? Can we get David Williams to write a book about information, do you think, for kids? So yeah, something like that. So going out and getting into a different arena, a bigger arena, keeping your eye on what's happening, these trends. So I do read a lot about macro trends, as we call them, big trends, and what's going on, and then I work hard to keep myself in that arena and understand where my role fits and spot where it doesn't. So I reinvented myself, yes, but I reinvented what my company did over 25 years. So from 86 to when I sold it. And we kept going and we grew and we got smaller and we grew and we got smaller in terms of number of staff, depending on what we were doing. But we were always ahead of the game because we were constantly getting to the point that we could deliver something which was going to come down the track before most people delivered it. So it's knowing that, and the only way to do that is to really understand who your customers are. So also knowing who your customers are. And finally, the purpose thing. Practice the purpose. What is your purpose? You really need to know, and you really need to believe in it. So I think those things mainly.
Thank you, because I do remember all those years ago when you first, well, it wasn't actually all that long ago, but when you said to me, can I come and talk about blockchain? And I said, well, yes, of course, not understanding at all what you were talking about. And of course, we all heard it first at the session that you did on blockchain at PSG, and we were all ready to at least meet our IT colleagues jargon for jargon if we didn't all really understand at that point exactly how blockchain works. So when our IT people said, "Oh, this blockchain thing, it's really wonderful. We could do this and this," we're saying, "Well, actually, maybe we need to." And it is about, I think, understanding what's coming over the horizon and not being scared of it. That we can't sort of shut ourselves in our little archive boxes forever. We need to come out and talk to people and learn things. And I think that it's a very good framework that you've
Absolutely.
suggested to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing too is, don't agree with me, disagree with me. You know, I'm not perfect. I haven't got all the answers. I'm just someone who talks a lot, who shouts a lot, who can get an audience. You know, I can go to other audiences because I have a huge network across many countries. And so I talk to lots of people, and some people look at me and go, "Oh God, will you stop bleating on about that?" Because they don't want to hear about it anymore. But that's the way, you know, be annoying is sometimes better than not being annoying. But I do want you to disagree with me, because because I'm trying to cover a lot at the moment, you only get to cover it superficially. You're the guys who will actually get into the detail and say, okay, it was a good thing she sent us down that route, maybe, but actually it doesn't go anywhere. A bit like the blockchain thing.
Right,
At that time, it was too early. It didn't go anywhere. Now, maybe slightly differently. But it's worth just, you know, thinking that you're the guys who will deliver, not me. And you're right, I'm not going to retire. Although I beg you, if I start sounding like some old hag who doesn't know what she's talking about, you really, really need to tell me, because I couldn't bear that. But, you know, I will be carried out in an archive box, because I love this. I love this profession so much. It is so exciting. And right now it is more exciting than ever.
And I think from my perspective, having known you for quite a long time now, I'm not allowed to say anymore how long, because Alison gets upset if I say how long I've known Alison. But it's about passion as well. I think about being passionate about what we do and why we're doing it. And it's like the guy at NASA when he said, who was sweeping the floors, and they said to him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon." And I think it's the same for us in the public sector. Sometimes we can get a bit buried, but actually we're keeping children safe, we're helping getting potholes filled, we're helping with all of those things for the citizens in our particular area, or in the places where we're at, in the other places in the public sector where we're working, to actually make people's lives better. And that for a lot of and it's that passion about wanting to keep moving everything forward, because it's a good thing to be doing.
Definitely. Yeah, well, you know me, I can be as passionate as ever, because I just, you know, in fact, you have to tell me to shut up, Elizabeth.
Well, I will be honest, this is the first time that we've got 8 minutes to go, and we're coming toward the end, because usually you say to me, "I haven't got an hour's worth of material, Elizabeth," and I go, "Oh yes, really, Alison?" And you go, "Yes, really," and sort of an hour and 20 minutes later I'm going, "Yes, I knew that." But we are saying that this is online has definitely been a new experience, I think, for everybody. So
Yeah. I just noticed Paul.
Paul,
I
yeah.
didn't realise Paul. Hi, Paul. I didn't realise you were on the call. Paul's almost been around as long as me. Not quite, but almost. He was asking a question, and I just noticed it on the. Do you see it there?
Yes.
Yeah. What happens when people go bad? Oh, Paul, it just is awful. But you know, I think that if we work hard to get the information right, then that will help in some ways, because then you can't contest the information. And also, I go back to the schools thing. I go back to saying we need to get children to understand the importance of the information in some way. I mean, I'm not really good with children in that sense. I don't know how to approach a child to explain, even though I've got 2 of my own and grandchildren as well now. I've got no idea how to explain to a child how to do that. But teachers, these wonderful teachers that teach in the primary school and all that, they're bound to know how to deal with that. But they need to have it on their curriculum. They need to start talking about this more. I mean, I know they talk about social media and everything, but it's not just the effect of writing the lies. I suppose it's just about making sure they understand the consequences can be bigger than they realize.
Yeah, and I mean, I know I certainly noticed that with my guides, maybe more so than the brownies, who are slightly younger. But we do have some very interesting conversations about whether they can believe what they actually see online and in other places, and about how you analyze whether what you're being told is the truth or not. So I think it is very interesting that we need to get children to start thinking about these things as early as we possibly can. So I don't think we've got any more questions. We've got some lovely feedback coming up. I don't know whether you can see.
I've got my, by the way, I'm just going to say, I don't know if you can see it. I've got my, this is the Christmas Carol. This is the book. It was my father's. He won it as a prize when he was a schoolboy. So that's a long time ago, because my dad, he's dead, my dad, but my dad's would be nearly 100. So this book is pretty old, and that was what I was using to get the quotes out. So there you go. You can't take the information out of a girl, can you? She has to go back to her books.
So if anyone, unless anyone's got any other questions, I'm going to say a huge thank you to Alison. As always, that's been hugely thought-provoking. One day I will find a reason to disagree with you, but so far you're so far down the track, and I'm running to keep up that disagreement is usually at the back of my mind. But thank you for giving us that permission. And I'd also like to say thank you to Sarah, who unfortunately can't unmute her microphone, but obviously she set up all the live storm today, got it all working, and got us online. So huge thank you, Alison. Sarah, for that, and to Alison for her presentation. We will be reconvening. I think our first meeting is the second week in March, but I'm busy working on speakers and themes at the moment, and I'm hoping that by the end of this week I'll have a rough program to share. But it might be January. We will just depend. But our next event will be on Livestorm. I think it's it'll be the third Wednesday in March. So it just leaves me to say thank you very much to everybody for attending. I hope you have a lovely afternoon and a wonderful Christmas, and I'll look forward to seeing people in the new year.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Thank you.